Ready to start? Do we have someone? Right, lovely, good. So each rapporteur can come up here and speak from here, please. And just great everybody down the front. Thank you. Oh, right, they're all going to line up. Good. Okay. Who's going to start off?
After you.
Okay, so it's really difficult to synthesize what has been said because everything it was very interesting and going in many different directions because everybody was reflecting on their own system and what they could take from what we did today. Despite this, what struck me is that finally, in the end, we all have we are all confronted with the question of dealing with spectrum and knowing when to intervene on a spectrum of various elements. And this is basically, if you try to synthesize the different questions that were raised, there's a multidimensional element of spectrum, which is to say situations that are hard to pinpoint on a scale and that can vary, they can fluctuate, and there is no very clear organization. Reality is more complex and multidimensional, of course, than our solutions and our interventions can be. So this element of spectrum can be found between the notion of universal services versus prevention versus intervention. So we have a whole gamut, a whole range of interventions. Between community, family and child, and the different elements, the different universes, the different environments the child is in. Between various institutions and getting everybody to work together, and because everybody is working with the family and children, but not necessarily in a coordinated way, and how we can create some more continuity between people intervening there. Also, a question of collective versus individual care can be drawn, and also there's also a very difficult interaction which also has this element of a spectrum that does not necessarily involve the same levels or clear-cut situations, which is to say the difference between wide needs and populational problems such as poverty, macro issues, such as territorial issues and things like that, going all the way to individual situations and affecting individual situations, and how do you tackle and how do you help a child and a family in a situation that is affected by a macro problem that is not being tackled right now. So this question, with all the interventions that were in our group, were basically raising these various questions related to that. So basically targeting. How do we target? Should we target? Nobody really likes the notion, but how do we make it so that universalism is effective? That universal services are indeed effective, because the issue was raised that there is, of course, non-take-up and that there are avoidance strategies that are at work in the general population. So how do you make it so that everybody has indeed access to universal services, and how do you improve that net? So that would be, I guess, the challenge, is making it effective and creating an effective range of services between universal services and intervention, between universal services, prevention, intervention, support that can reflect and adapt to the very multifaceted and very all over the place nature of situations that people are confronted with in their everyday work. So that would be, I guess, the synthesis, and I hope everything is pretty much in there.
Thank you very much.
We started with what was what people take from Andy's presentation, and then we spent quite a while talking about what we took from that. But that was a really great kickstart to the few days, because for each of us it came down to the very human psychology of winning an argument, which I think then the rest of the few days really helped us to feed our specific interests or whatever. So making an economic case was seen by everybody as very, very useful. And we were coming from such different places. We in Wales feel so privileged and lucky, even though we actually have the very same arguments as other nations who are way earlier on in what they're looking to build. But the same arguments at the moment is about how to win an argument that families are entitled to it. So what's the pragmatic decisions that you should argue to say this would make economic sense? And so we discussed models of how we can share and help each other to actually do the maths and do that kind of thing, so you can win an argument with a politician. Then how do you work to relieve the sense of entitlement or non-entitlement, the public that are being fed by the media about parents who don't deserve what we should be giving. It's such a Victorian argument, but it's right back on all our radars now. And should we be arguing from a children's rights way? So we had a quick mini symposium for half an hour, and we've come up with the conclusion that we need that broad approach. We need to have this makes sense to politicians for you if you want to get voted, and you can announce these things, this makes sense. You can have the little sly, do it anyway, and you don't need to tell the world about it, because actually, you will see differences. So we talked about a lot of that, and we talked about how people were approaching it in different places. The short-termism of politicians were seen as a major problem. So a lot of discussions about, conditional transfers, pros and cons. So there's a lot of practice exchange, and we've all exchanged emails, and we're looking for some funding to go and visit each other. So, that's really good. We also talked about evaluation, and everybody is using evaluation in terms of their practice, the difference it's making. How do people approach that in parenting, support, the formal ones, the informal ones, soft outcomes. We can again also hope to share what we can do there. And we spoke about well-being, measuring well-being, because we really do believe the well-being of parents as a result of any support is going to impact on the well-being of children. So we saw it as a very broad thing. So loads of things we would like to actually, if we weren't rushing away today, we could have spent. So maybe we come back wherever else in the future. The questions we're going to take home is one question, in our work with staff, are we talking about children's rights? Do our staff actually know how to be thinking in that way? And we thought probably not. In Wales, we dropped the 7 core aims, which is the way we framed the UNCRC. Stopped that for a while to talk about programmes, and we understand now it's kind of coming back on the fore. So we need to re-educate our workforce to actually talk about children's rights. And I guess that would be fair enough to finish there, but we have swapped emails, so we'll probably keep a debate going.
Thank you.
There's one thing of coming sort of third or fourth, because most of the things that we also agreed on have already been said. However, the surprise for me, the came out and surprise for a lot of people that came out, was actually the commonality right across the countries. We do all have the same problems, but different circumstances. And from countries, and coming from Ireland, I mean, we've had so much investment in things like research and impact studies and evaluation, to Greece or to Serbia that didn't have that, and yet we still have the same problems. And one of the major problems and the commonality, and I suppose our question that we're taking away, is how do we close the gap? So we have all this evaluation, we have all this knowledge, but what impact is it making? Because, and again, coming back to my previous speaker, is politicians. Politicians cannot read academic literature. And it's trying to get them to understand in real terms and in reality what we need to do to make a difference in practice. There was also a commonality, I think, coming from a practitioner point of view as well, of how do we sell this to politicians? How do we get the programmes that we know work actually to them, unless they have a vested interest in that part? The economic case definitely came up. We all agreed that all children are equal, but in times of recession, some children are more equal than others, and we're back to the targeting and universal services. So I think generally our questions to take away is closing the gap. We have the evaluation, we have the research. How do we move that from programme research into mainstreaming? How do you take short-term evaluations into long-term services? How do we get the academia, politicians and practitioners all to understand the same thing?
Thank you very much.
We decided to go on another way, so we decided to have 3 main striking points, of which we will address here. So we mix a bit the challenges and also the commonalities. And the first commonality that we found was that the prevention, the principle of prevention. It means that there's an urgency to involve children and involve all the active persons at the circle of the research and also of the policy making and so on. And there's an urgency also for children to be protected from the harms of the world in terms of the policy. This was a striking point. In terms of the practical work, we noticed there was, in terms of engagement, in human engagement, which requires consultations at all levels, and it also requires that schools are also, it requires also the emphasis on the exchange and how important was this school to improve the exchange and start, like the colleague said, exchange emails amongst each other and start this process of exchange information. There was an emphasis on not creating a new database, but to create schools like this to improve the exchange and create meetings with people who actually have the opportunity to change information. And I finish with a dilemma in terms of the policy level, which was in where does it start? So where's the starting point in terms of is it the evidence base or is it the other way around? And we finished with this challenge to present on the policy level, which is we challenge the fact that we don't know where it actually starts. If you have an evidence-based program and if it works, or if you have to present the information to the policymakers, or is it the other way around? You have to have a good and you have to have a good quality evaluation to get the funding. So it was a striking point of understanding where did this start. So where's the starting point?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. So, those were the feedback from the 4 groups this morning. Very quickly, just to sum up the summing up, I think we heard about the complexity for the issues, and that came across certainly for the few days. The questions about universalism versus targeted work, whether or not with universalism, the take-up and how effective is that. I liked the bit completely about winning the argument, the economics case, because this is very important work. And it's about, really, isn't it? It's about taking what we know, putting it into no more than the one pager that goes to your politicians to argue your case, and taking your policy makers with you. So again, I think Galway would have played a huge part in making the arguments with our ministers, with our governments at the time, to bring some significant changes about in Ireland. So it's how to use the research to advocate, and certainly the politicians, as we know them, will not read this. They need this with clear messages. Complexity gets too complex for them sometimes. So people were very pleased that the bringing together of practitioners, policymakers and researchers here in the school has worked, and look for more of that. And the next stage in is, how do we get the politicians into that? How do we pull that together? The importance of sharing information and exchanging information and working together, with some countries in one position, some countries in another position. Every country, though, has to find its own way through. And that while some of the changes that have happened in some countries might be very useful to you, not everything is takeable down from the shelf, because we all have our own culture and our own way of doing things, dare I say. And then I think the nice dilemma left to us at the end: where do we start? Do we start with the evidence base to take forward to get the money, because that's how we deliver services, or do we start with the evaluation? So certainly some questions left for us to take away and ponder off. But the positive is we're working together, and together we can help to solve the problems one by one. Now and again there's a revolution, but most ways the change happens is by evolution and doing it step by step, as long as the direction of travel is correct. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to Janet.
So you'll see in your programme that at the end, in small print, it says programme subject to change. And I think this morning we have been trying to figure out how to adapt to, as you see, quite a diminished participants here, which is a shame people couldn't stay. Some people miscalculating the time of buses to get back to Dublin, including ourselves, and knowing that we have to finish a little bit earlier than planned, and squeeze what we had hoped to go to 12:30 into to finish now at 11:30. And we spent some time as partners in the monthly or bi-monthly Skype calls that we had in preparing this, how to use this last session around the policy roundtable. And this was all about sort of how are we scaling up. And the focus has very much been on practice and research with policy literacy. So how does this feed into policymakers? But it wasn't really a space for the high-level policymakers. And I think what Nora sort of concluded there is, how are we packaging this so that we're really heard by policymakers? And the reality is that we're not here necessarily to do that. We are here around to be thinking together, to be working together, to really deepen our own understanding so that we can be much better in advocating for change towards the policymakers. So it's kind of changing all the time, and we also don't have the participants that we'd originally invited, or all of the ones that we'd originally invited. So WHO Europe agreed to present a video, but in view of the time that we have, and it's a 10-minute video, we have scrapped that. So great apologies, and I hope that he's not watching on web streaming, but he shouldn't be, because he was supposed to be otherwise engaged. So we will put it on our website, and we hope that you will take the time to look at it, because WHO European Region does have a programme called Investing in Children, so something that's close to our heart because we work at Commission level, and it's focused on prevention of the European Child Maltreatment Prevention Action Plan 2015-2020, and all of our countries are signed up to that, which includes a commitment to develop action plans and strategies, engage with stakeholders. So it is a vehicle through which you can use to pressure your governments to work on this agenda. We also don't have Olivier from OECD, although he was scheduled to come until the last minute. He had couldn't make it for family reasons, so he's not with us today. But we do have Daniel from Eurofound, based in Dublin, but he will explain a little bit more about what the work that they do. And we have Agnes, of course, who's one of our partners in organising this, we would be able to tell you a little bit more about the Council of Europe. So there we're talking about sort of how does this fit into the bigger international policy piece. We don't have a representative from the European Commission who was originally invited. This is Julius Obdebeker, who is in the Directorate responsible for social affairs, and he says this, he is the person in the Commission that deals with child poverty. One person from 20,000 people working in the European Commission is not great, but he takes that as his chapeau, and we are working very closely with him, and we will be taking back the results of this symposium back to him. And we had another speaker who was originally planned, I think, Agatha, or have I said everybody from the Policy Roundtable was originally planned? Of course, and we invited Jean-Claude Legrand from UNICEF, but he is also very, very, very busy with the responsibilities on UNICEF dealing with the migration and refugee crisis, so was unable to be with us this morning. So we are working with what we have, and what we thought would actually be more helpful is, in addition to hearing back from Daniel and Agnes, to also have the opportunity to hear from some of the policymakers who have been participating in this school. So actually we've invited that Nora gives a few words as chair of TUSLA at a national level in Ireland, what the takings are from this and how it resonates with her own work, but also then from Wales and from the city of Athens, maybe some of the takings from this event and how it resonates with their own work. So we're going to start with the international level, and I'm going to ask you to really squeeze so that we have 5 minutes for each of the speakers, and then we can still aim to be closing at 11:15. Thank you. And if you could come up to the podium, because it's going to be web streamed. Oh, so we can sit, if that's more.
You want to stand? Yeah.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be reflecting very briefly on some lessons learned for me regarding this school here in Galway. I'm going to focus mostly on the workshop on evaluation, because that's the area where we have been working in the field of early childhood education and care. So my organization, Eurochild, it's the European Agency for the Improvement of Living and Working Conditions, and we deliver research to trade unions and employer associations, and therefore workforce issues are of particular interest to us. And we have carried out recently a review of studies that show the link between working conditions and training opportunities of staff working with children in early childhood education and care, and the impact that working conditions and training have on the quality of services and the outcomes of children receiving these services. And at the same time, we've also looked at examples of inclusive practices that have, and by inclusive practices I mean additional resources in early childhood education and care that aim to make these services more inclusive for children who have a disability, who have a learning difficulty, or come from a disadvantaged background. This includes things like additional teachers, specific training, or a specific material. So we looked at cases that have been evaluated as successful. And I could see yesterday in the workshop on evaluation shown that some of the findings that we had linked directly with the discussions, particularly the issue of taking into account the views of children. So in these evaluations of inclusive practices, we could see that although children were the ultimate beneficiaries or service users, none of the evaluations of the case studies that were selected included gathered their views. So we have that the evaluations are very good normally at gathering the views of practitioners, of children and other project staff, but not of the children. So that's a serious omission because of issues like, for instance, Mario mentioned yesterday, the triangulation of results. but it's also related to the issue of having the need to have participatory evaluations that gather the views of all the stakeholders. So it's not only important to know what works, but it's very important to know what works for whom. Somebody mentioned yesterday the need to include the thick outcomes, because we have that what constitutes good parenting for an academic researcher might not be the same or what the families participating in an initiative consider as good parenting. So it's important to have a debate about the pros and cons of what type of evaluation, but it's important to have into account into that debate to have some sort of evaluations that have some participatory element, or that gather all the views of all the stakeholders. So, for instance, the work that we've done looking at the impact of working conditions and training opportunities, we've not only included controlled trials and before-after studies, but also view studies that are crucial to know whether practitioners feel that the training they receive is of any use. So I think it's important to take into account or to include evaluations with different types of research designs, but also put more emphasis on the rigor of the evaluations. So rather than focusing only on what the pros and cons of RCTs, looking whether the sampling is done in a rigorous manner, whether the data is collected and analyzed in a rigorous manner. And some of the issues that we found in the evaluations that we did of inclusive practices that I think are worth mentioning is the importance to look at the long-term effect of initiatives. We found that very few of the evaluations of inclusive practices did some sort of follow-up after 6 months after the initiative was carried out. Another area that I think I'm going to be bringing with me, and where we need to put more emphasis in Eurofound, is the whole issue of including cost effectiveness in evaluation. So not only knowing whether practices produce value for money, but through cost effectiveness we can compare similar initiatives and know whether the initiatives provide the best value for money. So I think it's something that should be incorporated in the work that we do in Eurofound when selecting good practices across Europe. One other area that I think is important to highlight in the issue of evaluation is the independence of the evaluation. So we have found in a lot of the practices that we include is that the same people that design the initiatives were the same people that implemented the initiatives, and that they were also the same people who evaluated the initiatives. So there's a clear conflict of interest, because in most of these evaluations, the people found that, yes, the services had indeed delivered the good shocking results there. So I think it's important for the discussions of European funding to make sure that any type of funding for parenting support programs or early childhood education and care includes enough funding so that third parties can carry out a thorough evaluation, so that there are no conflicts of interest. And some of these issues that I mentioned of having inclusive evaluations and having some sort of long-term follow-up are also taken into account. And lastly, I just wanted to finish saying that we have indeed a wide and a wealthy types of evaluations, of practices across Europe. We do have also a wide range of studies on evaluations of good practice, and I think it's very important now to provide, and I guess that's the role for Eurofound, an overall picture of what does research in a specific area tells us. Because we have at the moment different studies published in different formats, in peer-reviewed journals, in grade literature, in very different languages. They sometimes focus on the same type of, or they analyze the same type of initiatives, and then they show completely different results, sometimes contradictory. I think, for instance, triple P that has been evaluated in different countries, and then you find that sometimes they find no effect, sometimes they found that it's very positive. If you are a policy maker, how do you make sense of all this variety of results? So I think There's a role for organizations like Eurofound, and Eurochild has produced a company of good practice in parenting support a few years ago to synthesize and put together and assess the findings of different types of studies, paying attention to the multilingual aspect, because we tend to focus mostly on research published in English. So we have started this work of synthesizing knowledge across Europe in different languages by doing this systematic review of studies looking at workforce issues and the quality of early childhood education and care, which is the first one in Europe that looks at studies in all official languages of the European Union. But I think this is something that needs to be taken up more by research organizations at the European level. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Daniel. I'm speaking around the room. Does everybody know Eurofound? Does anybody, those who have previously heard of Eurofound, the European Agency Living and Working Conditions based in Dublin? Yes, so we see some heads nodding. So we just celebrated 40 years. They are funded, they're supporting EU institutions and, as you said, the employers and trade unions. And what's interesting is over the last few years, we've really been beginning to focus on children through the work on family and parenting support and also on early childhood. So we hope that through this, participants will also be accessing the work that you're doing and maybe influencing and supporting the work that you do in the future. Agnes.
Hello everyone. I have 3 takeaways for me personally and the organization I work for, the Council of Europe. And the first one is that, which may be evident for you, but it was good that we are reminded of that, and I will take that back, is the cross-cutting character of family and parenting support throughout a lot of child rights issues. We just finalized the development of a new Council of Europe strategy for the rights of the child for the 6 years to come, which representatives of all your governments, all European governments worked on for a year and a half to agree on common priorities in the field of child rights. And 5 priorities were identified. None of these is called family and parenting support. But the first one, equal opportunities for children, of course, has a clear social rights aspect, talks about anti-discrimination or the right to non-discrimination, talks about migrants and refugees. So that has a clear family and parenting support aspect. The second one, child participation. I don't have to tell you what the relationship is. The third priority identified is a life free from violence for all children. Of course, parenting support is the key in preventing corporal punishment, which is again the most kind of frequent form of violence that children experience. The fourth objective will be access to child-friendly justice for all children. We were discussing more on the sides about the effects of divorce on children, about child removal and court decisions, how to take these decisions and design the process in a child-friendly manner. And the fifth objective will be children's rights in the digital environment. We have not touched, but this is something we're really interested in, the aspect of digital parenting. So this is my first takeaway. The second one is I realized that the international standards, the European, the international kind of, let's say, human rights, but not only human rights standards, are a very valuable tool and for guidance, and should maybe even be referenced more by those who work on the ground. The UNCRC, of course, is the key compass for us. But also I realized that the 2006 recommendation on policies, Council of Europe recommendation on policies to support positive parenting is still a very valuable tool, and I kind of advise you to have a look at it more closely, which translates a child rights perspective, the UNCRC, into the parenting support language and work. in the absence of my colleagues from the European Commission, I would also really strongly advise you to have a look at the European Commission recommendation investing in children, which is very progressive, has been elaborated with a lot of support from NGOs, and is something that should guide the governments of EU countries. And also at the work that the Commission is doing on integrated child protection mechanism, which, if it goes well, and this is all our responsibility to make sure it goes in the right direction, goes in this direction that we're discussing about a coordinated, preventive and so on approach to the topic. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the UNCRC as the common basis of a common language for us that should be referred to, should be a core consensus among us, with a little question mark for me personally about the best interest of the child, which I think is indeed a really tricky concept, at the same time can be important. So maybe a takeaway also for you and also for me, every time you use it or somebody else uses it, ask about what stands behind that. What is it? What does it actually mean to the person? And third, very quick takeaway is what I will take away to my organization, the Council of Europe, even the results and the analysis of the evaluation forms still pending. So this is not yet fully evidence-based, but based on intuitive evidence. And this school had an immense return on investment for our organization. So I thank Eurochild and the UNESCO chair for taking the initiative, for organizing the school, and for carrying it through together with UNESCO, Innocenti and us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnes, and I think it's good to recall the Council of Europe instruments that we have, and that all of our governments are very active. And I was really impressed in the recent expert committee meeting where member states are represented, how engaged governments were to really contribute to this strategy. So they have now, and it's going to be launched in April next year, really committed to implementing those type of priorities. So it's a great instrument. And those government representatives who are active in Council of Europe are also then in the expert committee of the European Commission for the 28 EU member states. And there are many, many tools that we can use working as practitioners and those working at level 2 pressure from the top down level as well. So I'm going to move to national level, and we are really pushing for time. So I'm going to ask Laura just to give a few, 3 minutes? Is that okay, Laura?
That's fine.
I'm going to stand up here so that I know somebody will tell me 3 minutes. I could, like most Irish people, I can talk a lot, so I'm going to be very disciplined. Ireland has done some really important things over the last number of years that has changed the landscape, I hope, for how we can go forward for children and families. I have very bad news from my colleague Trevor. The changes came out of informed passion, Trevor, and we need plenty of that if we're going to make things different. So we have our children's rights written into our constitution now. That was a very big ask from the people of Ireland, and it was challenged, but our Supreme Court has ruled. So we have children's rights written into our written constitution, which does a lot of things for us. We have an agency. I'm privileged to be the chair of that agency, and my takeaways from this very important school is a number of things. The agency, it brings together children and families work, child protection, child welfare, education attainment, keeping children in school, helping them to stay there when things become difficult, and very importantly, family resource centres that are local, that can respond locally to need. But that's just a first step. I take away that my organisation and Ireland generally needs to keep listening. It needs to keep informing itself about what is best practice. It needs to keep listening specifically to children and listening to families. When we talk to them, when our academics talk to them, what they want is seamless services. They don't want a whole pile of different people in their family life every day of the week, but they want some key people that they know are there, that they know are available to them in a helpful way. They want their services local, But they want their services, of course, to be delivering quality services. So we have to keep asking the questions. Are we doing it? What are we doing? Are we doing the right things? Are we doing them right? And that's where our very good collaboration with our academic researchers and our academic institutions are extremely important, so we can answer yes. And I think what I take away, particularly in my role as the chair of the board, is to be constantly asking my executive the question: where are we going? What are we looking for here? Are we doing the right things? How are we checking that we are doing the right things? Are we listening to children? Are we listening to parents? And are we listening to communities? Because that we're a democratic country, our politicians are elected, we have a Minister for Children, we're around the budget table. This year, our arguments about getting extra budget for our children and families have won out. We have to win next year and we have to win the year after. So we all have to work together so that we can take this forward. And we're going to keep doing it from a position of informed passion. Otherwise, nothing will happen. Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll now move to subnational level, and if I can ask Maria, who's Vice Mayor of Athens, with responsibility, so specific responsibility for children's rights issues, and I understand that you're the only municipality with a mayor, Vice Mayor with specific, explicit responsibility for children, which I think in the current context of Greece is really, really important. So, please.
I was not prepared to speak about a municipality, because a municipality is a small place for the whole world. But I think that Athens municipality has the, I don't know, the big, it's maybe you can see in a small place what is happening at this time in the whole world. It's for the Greek so the Greek situation, Athens is the biggest place, and it's big because not only of the population, but because it's the center of the bureaucracy of all happening in this country. So many people pass through Athens every day. And from these people, some of them stay in Athens and stay for a few months, for a few years, or for their life. So when we started to be in economic crisis, all the structures and institutions for children, families, and poor people had to change. I will give you an example. We were, the municipality had to feed 20,000 people every day because they had no work anymore, no job, and it's 1.5 million unemployed people in Greece. So we had to face, first thing, to feed people, not to have people starving in the streets. And then, we had to be organized to receive people from other countries who are refugees and they want to stay in Greece or they want to go. All these problems that occurred, it was we had to expect maybe, but we didn't. So we had to act immediately as a municipality, not as a government. That means that we had no means to do it, because as a government maybe you have money or the authority to do it, but as a municipality you don't. But we had to do it because, as Mayor Kamini says, everybody complains to the mayor. And that's all around the world, I think. So we decided to act first and think after, and that's not a good thing, but we had to do it. The good opportunity for me to be here was exactly that now we can take a little time to think and to organize things. And from my part, I'm a psychologist, and that was my drama all these days, because my interest was in all the research and the practice around Europe, but I had to think like a decision maker for some things. But at the end of the day, the experience was very positive, and I'm going to propose to my colleagues in Athens to do it, to come to schools like this. Because if they stay for 2 days, not to think of what is happening now, but what I have to organize for after, I think it would be a good exercise and it will have good effects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for being with us these 2 days. And from Wales now.
Hello everyone. I'd just like to start with the quote that we've seen during the conference, that it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that's really what I'm going to take away with me even stronger, that it is everybody's responsibility in this village, wherever the village is in the whole world. We've got individuals, we've got families, we've got services, we've got politicians. We need to be thinking about our village, about understanding what we want. We're guided by the government in Wales, the Welsh government. We also have some influence from the UK government. But in Wales we have 4 key anti-poverty programmes, and at the moment some recommendations are going through the Welsh government as how we better align those, how we have better outcomes, how we focus on those outcomes. So our village is always at the moment going through change, and I think we have to adapt and be flexible to change, recognising the research, recognising good practice, pulling in the evidence and influencing. And we need to support people through the change. So we need a strategic vision for our village. We need to know where we want to go. How do we make that a reality? And using a common dialect with skilled people, with responsible citizens, strong relationships, and that comes, we've talked a lot about integration and sharing. I think that applies, to the services in our villages as well. Sometimes we talk about hard to reach families, but I challenge us with, are we hard to reach services as well? Are we hard to reach when we're talking to each other? Do we give each other enough time to actually support and influence and work together? I think in Wales we're very good at sharing practice. We have to do that because we are a small area, so we have to learn from each other. We don't get a lot of financial resource compared to some other areas, but we do get more than others in our village. But we have to make the best of it. We have to learn from each other and to share. And through Children in Wales, it's represented today. They coordinate a number of groups that are either best practice sharing, taking guidance forward, local implementation, and allowing us to learn from each other and to share that across other practice groups. So I would encourage that. The other thing that's come out strongly is evaluations. And again, from a local implementation point of view, we know we have to evaluate. We know we have to put a case together for an economic case, moving more towards early intervention and prevention. But we need to shift the money somehow. So we need to do the doings, but the money may still be up here. So how do we get to that place? And evaluation definitely supports that. So as it's the season of Christmas, and we're in December. I'd just like to give you some gifts should you wish to unwrap them this season, or maybe hold them aside for another season when you're ready. But on the Welsh Government website there is a really good document. It's in English and Welsh, so it might look a bit hefty when you see it, but if you're particularly interested in evaluations, there's a really good list of evaluation standardised measurement tools in there, and also a list of parenting programmes and where they've come from as to which study has actually evaluated them and what the level of evaluation is. So I'd like to give you that, because I know when I certainly started in this role 8 years ago, that was quite a feat to actually pull that together and to get that in your hand. So it's a really good document. The other one that we did was a literature review, and that is on the Research and Practice website for England. But again, I can provide that because it lists the evaluation tools again and the purpose of them. So if you haven't done that piece of work and you want that, I will certainly gift that to you. And the other one that I'm certainly going to be looking at over this next year is the costings. And again, I'll be using some work that's already happened in England, which is a framework list starting from early intervention right down to social workers, and some costings. You could take the list, apply it locally. Somebody's already done the work, so use it, and we need to do that together. So thank you from Wales.
Thank you very much, Gail and Maria and Nora, for stepping in at the last minute. I think it has been helpful to get those takeaways from you who are in decision-making roles in your respective jurisdictions, and help us think about also how we're packaging this to policymakers that we're directly engaging with. I have a total of 2 minutes to close if we are going to hit the 11:15 revised deadline. I hope you'll excuse me if it's a few minutes that we go over that. We have had a very, very intense 2.5 days. We have been moving between conceptual, abstract concepts at a more theoretical and a research level, and we have been going into very concrete practice and policies. And I think that I've spoken to many colleagues. Most of you are not native English speakers. It's very intense, and it's quite tiring to be able to really absorb all of that. We will be providing all of the PowerPoints, all of the papers. It's going to be on the website. So they're already on the website, as Agatha. And we will be working, and it's mostly UNICEF Innocenti Centre and the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre that will be leading on the preparation of, we won't call them proceedings, what do we want to call them? A report, which is a compilation of the articles that are coming out from the expert interventions over the last 2 days. So we will be producing something over the course of next year. And I think this might also be the opportunity where we think about presenting those lessons learnt to policymakers in the future. So very much we will be trying to capture the discussions and the learnings from these 2 days. So I really hope that you have profited from this time, and that you will be able to take back and digest not only the information that you've received, but also the connections and the contacts that you've been able to forge over this meeting. We have a number of thank yous to make. Nora said that we would have a statement, and what I will do is, rather than putting that up right now and asking for feedback, I'm going to put it up at the end, when we've done the thank yous, when we've done the sort of goodbyes. And if people want to take it with them, photo it, take it with them, or come to us, Agatha and I, and make some suggestions, you're welcome to do that. We'll be using it as a Eurochild statement, because we feel that from the discussions of yesterday, it's been an opportunity for us to kind of just put a stake in the ground, say this has brought together many of the experts across Europe, and that we are cognizant of not only thinking about the long term, but how do we act immediately, in the immediate term, in the most responsible and compassionate way. So that is the statement which I think will be going up after I've done the round of thank yous. And if people want to change it or come and speak to us, then we can do that as we leave the room. So firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Pat and all your team for hosting us here in Galway. There's a secret I've told many people. The original plan was that we would have a Galway summer school in July. And I hope that maybe that will be possible in some time in the future. Galway is probably the place that I find most beautiful. The landscape, the sun, the light. And we haven't maybe had the opportunity to really profit from the place that this is your birth town, Pat, as I understand it, and it's really a beautiful place to be on the westernmost part of Europe. But thank you very much for hosting us here and for giving us such a warm welcome, and with all the pub and the dancing and everything else, hospitality has been great. Eileen, I don't know if she's in the room, but she's been doing, thank you very much, all the hard work, the administrative work that goes around it, and being so flexible in the last day. Particular thanks to my colleague, Agatha, who's sitting here in the front, who has been working tirelessly to put all of this together. So I know that a lot of people have been receiving emails, but I think it's really down to her persistence to be able to get such a really good mix of practitioners, policymakers, researchers. I think the dynamic has really, been very successful. Please do provide your feedback, but I think that was our objective, is to really get that different perspectives. Council of Europe, Agnes, thank you very much, not only for your input on all of the content and the thinking, but you're also financially supporting this event, which is hugely welcome. The European Commission, which finances Eurochild, is also putting substantial resources, through us into this event, so I hope that they will acknowledge that and take on board what they're investing in. And as you said, it's a good return on investment. I hope that they will think so too. And to UNICEF Innocenti Centre, with Yasmina here and all the thinking, and Heidi, I think, is somewhere here. And a number of the delegations have also been supported through UNICEF. So I think it's been a really fruitful partnership. I'm really glad that we were able to pull it off from the ideas that we sort of seeded some years ago. Please do give your written feedback. We'll be thinking about how we build on it, how we think about other occasions to be able to bring this together. But last big thank you for those of you who have stuck with us until a few minutes after 11:19, so I think we're still on time for people to get their buses. To you for staying with us, and to all of the contributions, thank you for being such active participants. Thank you to all of our experts for the speeches, and the country delegations for taking the time to really reflect and give your input from your perspectives. The panel this morning, I think we just all deserve a big round of applause. And safe travels. Please take sandwiches with you, and we look forward to hopefully meeting on another occasion. Thank you. And I will put this up now for the statement, I think, is there. Yes. Just one point before anybody leaves the door, all of you who are travelling, we do have an administrative urgency to get all of your expenses claims in as soon as possible. We've given you a deadline of 18th of December because